Well, good evening, friends. Welcome once again. This is Syracuse Basketball Postgame. It's presented by Krause Health. We're live here on the Syracuse Orange Basketball Facebook page, live on Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube as well. And this one was pretty much over before it started. As long as Duke remembered what time the game was and where to go, it felt like this was inevitable. And Duke takes down Syracuse 97-72 at the Carrier Dome. Over 31,000, the largest crowd on campus in college basketball this season, including a record student attendance. Over 8,000 students there to watch Syracuse not really be in this one at all. Duke landed a haymaker on the Orange early. The crowd at the Carrier Dome was up and standing for a long time before Syracuse even scored. Duke was up over 30 points at one point. They end up winning by 25 points in this game. So the two matchups, Duke faced Syracuse this year. Duke won game one back on January 22nd by 20 points. And this one, just an offensive onslaught by Duke. They win this 97-72. In this one, you had three players just absolutely dominate for Duke and all over 20 points. Mark Williams, 28 points and 12 boards for Duke. He had his way in the paint with Syracuse. Syracuse had no chance of stopping him, could do nothing to stop him. Paulo Banchero, 21 points on the night. Just one rebound for him, by the way, but he dished out 9 assists. A ton of those to Mark Williams, as noted. A.J. Griffin is just flat out one of the best shooters in the country. He's the younger brother of former Syracuse guard Alan Griffin, for those of you that remember Griff, of course, a recent Syracuse player. 20 points, 2 rebounds on the night, and Duke just absolutely, look, both teams actually shot over 50%. Actually Syracuse dipped to 49%, but both teams shot well. Duke shot 53%, Syracuse shot 42%, just that Duke had 15 3-pointers to Syracuse's 5. So in both games, Syracuse had a season low for them, 5 3-pointers. And Duke crushed Syracuse on the boards, 38-25, 17-10 on the offensive boards. I mean, man, the numbers almost don't matter here. Duke just flexed all night on the Orange. Syracuse made a little bit of a run at the end of the first half. They had an 11-0 run that carried over to a 13-0 run in the second half of this game. And Syracuse cut it to within less than 20 at times in this game. A little bit respectable, but Duke obviously was just not going to lose this thing. It was in control, wire to wire, one of the biggest blowout losses of the season for the Orange, and certainly one of the biggest losses in this series. And Duke has won 6 straight games over the Orange. And it's not just this game. It just shows you the huge talent gap that exists between Syracuse and Duke. I remember saying that in the first matchup here, and I'm going to start highlighting some of your comments here, guys, as we go. Appreciate you coming by. Make sure you always tell us where you're watching from. Always like to hear where you guys are out there tonight. Chris says, start Benny. Look, Benny Williams was the lone bright spot for Syracuse. Honestly, Buddy had 23 points, but Benny had 12 points and 5 rebounds. I mean, you'll take that. Benny has really struggled in the games he's gotten time. Duke just wasn't expecting him, I guess. He had a really cool reverse layup early in the game, aggressive. Finally had the Benny breakout game we've been waiting for. Unfortunately, it didn't really matter in the sense of this game, but maybe a sense of things to come for Benny Williams, and he's got a few more games to show what he can do carrying over into next season for the Orange. Doug says, struggled rebounding the ball, hard time covering the 3. Bright spot was Benny, who actually, I think you're right. I need to correct myself. I think he had 14 points in this game, right? Let me just glance at the old box score. Yeah, 14.6 rebounds. I mean, you'll take that from Benny. Really the only bright spot for the Orange. Dale says in over 40 years, never seen such an offensive display put on. To their credit, they didn't wilt, roll over. They just did not have any answers. And as Jimmy says here, too long, too athletic, too quick, too talented, lost to a much better team. Yeah, and the gap between Syracuse and Duke is Grand Canyon-like at this time. Remember, this is a Syracuse team that beat Duke a few years ago, really talented Duke team, 95-91 in overtime. Tyus Battle, Elijah Hughes, those guys. It feels like an eternity ago because they just can't run with this team. They don't belong on the same court with this team, and that's the top team in the league. That's what you're aspiring to be, and that's, when you go to the ACC, Syracuse, I don't think, has finished higher than 6th in the ACC since going to the league. They predicate everything by getting in the tournament, which is not a possibility for this team unless they win the ACC tournament this year. It's hard to imagine Syracuse doing that, particularly because they'll run into Duke. It looks like the way the brackets are shaping up now. If they win a game, it's no guarantee Syracuse even wins their first round game because of how unpredictable they've been. But as Matt says, hello from San Antonio. Duke thoroughly outclassed Syracuse, just have better athletes. Brian with a fun point here. It's okay. We're a hockey school now. Shout out to the Syracuse women's ice hockey team. They beat Mercyhurst today in the CHA tournament. There will be a Syracuse team in the NCAA tournament on that note, and that is the hockey team. I believe the Syracuse women's lacrosse team also won today. Last I looked, they were beating Notre Dame late. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. If Notre Dame came back and won that thing, I don't think they did. And, that's a team, by the way, that is going to be in the short breath to win the national championship in college lacrosse. So women's sports getting it done. Actually, that game went to overtime from what I'm seeing here. How about that? Notre Dame tied it up at 16. They go to overtime. Last I saw, Syracuse won the draw and called timeout. So my mistake. I thought Syracuse won that game. Regardless of how this Notre Dame game turns out, we'll see if they pull off the win. I'm just kind of looking at it here while we're talking about it. That's a team that's in the short breath to win the national championship. So point being, even if the basketball team doesn't make it, which they're not going to, frankly, you got a couple of teams that will. So there you go. Iris says 27 points off the bench, just not enough. Baramas at eBay showing a little spark off, not the bench, off the bench for Syracuse with Frank Anselm struggling in this one. So you had Benny with 14 points off the bench. You had, let me look at it here. Where's Barama? I'm looking on my box score. He's hiding at the bottom here. 11 points, 4 rebounds. You needed something from your center position. Just not enough with Mark Williams and Paulo Bencaro and company looming in the paint for the Orange. Joe Girard did have 18 points, 2 of 8 from three-point range, though. Buddy, 3 of 10 from three-point range, and those are the only 2 guys that made any shots. Cole Swider, not a factor at all, just 2 points. It just, you needed all hands on deck just to even be in this game. And obviously that was not the case for Syracuse in this game. So let's go to more of your comments. You guys are coming hot and heavy with them as always. Chris says, can't get down. Duke is really, really good. A lot of love for Benny. Just give Benny in there. Give Benny, and next year you're going to have a team where Buddy's gone. Jimmy's gone. Jim Boeheim saying this week, Cole Swider is not coming back next year, even though he has a year of eligibility. It's going to be a very young team next year. You're going to have a bunch of freshmen. Most of them were in the Dome tonight, by the way. So they're maybe kind of collaborating on what they can do to bounce Syracuse back next year. Guys like Chris Bunch and Peter Carey and Kadir Copeland and Justin Taylor. Taylor basically a clone of Buddy's game. But a lot of young guys, a lot of freshmen going to be out there. And Benny maybe taking a step forward here. So, look, what Syracuse is fighting for now is Michelle checks in from L.A. No Jesse. Symir out with stitches today. No way to avoid bad matchups. Proud that the team didn't give up and played with heart. We should note, yes, Symir Torrance had to leave the game. He cut his head. He hit Paulo Bencaro on the chin, as a matter of fact. Can't believe Bencaro didn't have to leave the game and had to get stitches and did not return. So we hope he's okay, of course, and will be available for the Orange on Monday. Daryl just lays it all out there. Team coach, recruiting, garbage. It's a top 25 recruiting class for what it's worth. I mean, they're getting a lot of credit because they have 5 guys coming in, but the only top 100 player in that bunch, no pun intended, is Chris Bunch, but that's a top 25 class for what it's worth. Let's see. Scott says needs to be some coaching staff changes, period. He's tired of all the staff. He wants everybody fired. And 2 games to go in the regular season. And this team's trying to stay above the 500 line. They're 15-14. They're 9-9 in ACC play. And you got North Carolina Monday. By the way, Armando Bacot for North Carolina had 28 points and 13 rebounds today against NC State. They lost Black, who's one of their key players. So, every bit that can help Syracuse go into Chapel Hill on Monday night, but that is not an easy place for Syracuse to turn around. Carolina's really controlled that series and has really dominated Syracuse, and Bacot is going to be like Mark Williams was in this game. He's just going to have his way with this team throughout the night, and Syracuse is going to have to find other ways to stay in this one, just as, they couldn't tonight when you got Cole struggling on the offensive end the way they did. I mean, you need Buddy, Joe, Cole, Jimmy just humming on offense to even be in these games. By the way, Jimmy, who had 27 points against Notre Dame Wednesday, didn't even score in this game. Played 21 minutes. He had 1 rebound. That ain't going to get it done. And he was thoroughly outclassed. I mean, Mark Williams, Ben Caro. I mean, it's not even the varsity versus the JV. That's the varsity versus like the modified team. When you saw that, frankly, the difference between athletes and the size between Duke and Syracuse. Obviously, Jesse Edwards would have made a big difference in this game, but Jesse played in the first game, and Syracuse still lost by 20. So I don't even know what that accounts to in this game. Duke is just on another level, and Syracuse is far, far away from the level that they are in at this point. As Ed notes, and a lot of you guys saying, best part of the game was Benny Williams. Dwayne says bigger, faster, stronger, shot the lights out, and that doesn't help anything. 31,000 plus at the Dome today, as we mentioned. The student crowd was great, but they were out of it like that. I mean, the crowd did what they could to stay in the game. I mean, hey, you paid all that money to be there. It's the most expensive ticket of the year. You might as well make the best of it. But Duke landed a haymaker. That was Mike Tyson, taking out Spinks in 90 seconds, whammo, and that thing was over. David says, will he require concussion protocol? The answer is yes. Any head injuries require concussion protocol, so we'll see how that goes. Got stitches. We don't know. I haven't seen Jim Boeheim's press conference yet, so I don't know if there's an update on that, but typically you wouldn't have an update on a concussion that quickly after the game, but he will go through concussion protocol, so we'll see how that goes for him. With Syracuse with the quick turnaround and traveling and everything, so hopefully he's okay at this point. Vince says they look like a high school team in embarrassment, have not been defending threes in the perimeter all year, rebounding. He wants Boeheim fired. This is on the coach. He built this team. There you go. They're coming out of the woodwork, friends. As Michael Antonio says, utter disgust. I mean, look, you want it to be competitive. Lori asks, is this the largest point spread win for Duke this season? 25. I'd have to look at their schedule, Lori. I know they played a couple of cupcakes early. They beat pretty big. But if it's not, it's certainly right up there. And this is against a fellow ACC team. Before the game, Mike Krzyzewski was given a framed photo of him and Jim Boeheim, and the photo was kind of set back on a piece of the old Carrier Dome roof. The really cool thing, though, is that Syracuse actually set up a scholarship in Mike Krzyzewski's name. And, Syracuse is a big school, of course, with veterans and the ROTC and the veteran connection that Syracuse University has. And, Mike has a military background, coached in the Army, of course, before Syracuse. What a gesture. I mean, it's one thing to, give him a gift. Louisville gave him some bourbon and a Louisville Slugger, given the backdrop of that city. To establish a scholarship in Mike Krzyzewski's name, that's pretty cool. And a great parting gift for Syracuse, for sure, at that point. So something to remember by, and something that I'm sure he is very thankful for. And what a classy gesture by Jim Boeheim, recognizing that the Krzyzewski's got a military background, and they gave him that. And listen, guys, 2 coaches, over 1,000 wins. Put aside the score of this game and the result of this game for the moment. Man, we're never going to see that again. Times in the Dome, and of course, when these 2 match wins, we might see it again in the ACC tournament just in general, but I don't think in my lifetime I'm going to see 2 coaches in the Dome that are the 2 winningest coaches in college basketball and have over 1,000 wins. As a matter of fact, I know I'm not going to see that again because of the years and the equity that those 2 build up over the years. Just incredible that they got the match wits and go at it. They're great friends, of course. Mike from Durham calling into Boeheim's radio show earlier this week. And there's a real respect between the 2. Of course, they coached together on Team USA back in the day. But Coach K wants to go out on top here. He has got a really good team that's going to be on the short list that can win the national championship. They're number 7 in the country right now. They'd be a 2 seed if the tournament started tomorrow. Duke can shoot the lights out. They've got 2 big guys in Williams and Bencaro. Griffin, you've got that a key guy that can hit threes. Duke doesn't really have a point guard. Keels and Roach kind of, share duties. So I think that'll be interesting. I think, guard play is what really wins you tournaments. But the way Duke looked tonight, man, how could you not put them in the short breath to win the national championship? Or maybe you don't, because they beat a bad team tonight. Let's see what Duke can do against some better teams in the tournament. But they're well on their way to an ACC regular season championship at this point. The way the ACC has been this year, it's been, and I think of like Gladys Knight and the Pips, right? It was Duke was Gladys Knight and everybody else was the Pips, just the backup band at this point. Rob jumps in to say, what's left to say? What if? We trounced Wake Forest with Edwards after the first Duke game. We're trending upward before Jesse's injury. With him, you're talking 4 or 5 guys who could score with his inside presence. Would have been interesting to see what would have happened tonight with what's most likely an 18-win Syracuse team ready to play Carolina and Miami and perhaps win some ACC tournament games to clinch an NCAA bid. I think you make an interesting point, Rob. Jesse played in the first game and Syracuse got run by 20. But obviously, Jesse was on a heater. He was playing so well when he went down. So it's just that. Like, would they have picked up a few other wins? Would they at least be in the conversation with the opportunity to do some damage in the ACC tournament? But, frankly, when he went down, that sunk their battleship. This was just not a team that was going to be competitive in any way, shape, or form. Jermaine said he had Syracuse losing big to Duke. I think most people did, honestly. Gabe says long athletic recruits next year, typical kind of guys that will do well in the system that Boeheim says could even play man-to-man based on how he feels about this recruiting class, be able to play defense, they'll be able to defend. And of course, we'll probably complain about the shooting, but I think it's going to be a better overall team. Yeah, Jim did say that this week. You did not hear that incorrectly, that given the athleticism and the quickness that's coming in with this recruiting class, they're going to play a bunch of young guys. They might have to incorporate some man-to-man next year. I think they're certainly going to play zone as they always do. But look, credit to Jim Boeheim if they do that, if it's an athletic enough team. People that have been calling for this team to play man-to-man, this is the most unathletic team I've seen in years at Syracuse. You play man-to-man defense, it's going to be worse. There's nothing you can do to stop guys like Mark Williams and Paulo Banchero and A.J. Griffin. You're just outclassed by those guys. It doesn't matter what defense you're playing. But if he's willing to do it and has already said that, he mentioned it on his radio show earlier this week, then, hey, good for him. And maybe starting to recognize that teams are just not intimidated by the zone anymore. They know how to handle it. Analytics, seeing more and more of it. San Diego State and West Virginia certainly didn't do well against it in the tournament last year. That's always something in your back pocket. But, you still have so many other games to play during the regular season. And certainly ACC opponents are very familiar with it at this point. So we'll see, a true sign of the apocalypse if Syracuse is playing man-to-man again. But Jim Boeheim said he's open to it with how athletic it appears these recruits are coming in next year. David says, what will be the game of the year at the Dome now? Will it still be Duke? That's a great question, because what made this game such a marquee event? Was it Syracuse and Duke? Was it just the brand name that Duke is? Was it Boeheim and Krzyzewski? I think in no sport do the coaches really stand out as the stars as they do in college basketball. To an extent, they do in college football, maybe in the NFL, NBA, there's a few names that pop. Hockey, not really, right? Go through all the major sports that we watch. The coaches stand out the most in college basketball. This is a prime example of that. So Jim Boeheim versus John Shire doesn't have the same ring to it. And then eventually when Boeheim moves on, whoever steps in, they're going to have very, very big shoes to fill at this point. Jack says, joining the ACC has been a disaster. It has not been a financial disaster for Syracuse, and staying in the Big East would have been a disaster. I miss the Big East, don't get me wrong, but, when you're a football school, as Michelle points out here, you don't have a choice. You have to be in a big boy Power 5 league. So I get what people are saying. Joining the ACC, they haven't finished higher than 6th in the league. They, just are not on the same level as the top teams. They've beaten some of these teams, but not consistently year in and year out. You look at recent years and all the, getting in the tournament by the hair on their chinny chin. I understand that. But, given the choice out there of where you got to be, if you want to pretend you got a major football program as well, you got to join the ACC. And Jack, it is all about the money. What else is new? Everything's all about the money at this point. And where else are you going to go, right? I'd rather be in a Power 5 league and be behind the velvet rope in college sports than not. Doesn't mean I don't miss the old Big East at times, right? See how well Providence is doing this year. How about Georgetown? Man, what a loss that's going to end up sticking out like a sore thumb for Syracuse. Georgetown has lost like 17 straight games. Insanity. So I miss it as much as anybody, but the economic reality of college sports these days, you got to be in a league like that, particularly if they didn't have a football program, which, perish the thought because I love football. But if they didn't, you'd have a point. But because they do, Dennis says money isn't everything. It is in college sports. It is if you want to compete, right? I mean, if you want to give back the money, the $25-30 million a year and go back in the Big East, you can do that, right? I mean, good life advice in some ways, Dennis, but in terms of college sports, I can't believe we're even having this conversation. But I get what people are saying. Mike notes it here, 68-70 in the ACC. I mean, we don't root for, here's where you guys make a great point, right? I mean, you got to be in this league and try and compete and keep up with the Joneses, if you will. But we don't root for spreadsheets, right? When Syracuse gets that $25-30 million payment from the ACC, it's not like we're all watching that going, woohoo! Look, it's in the checking account. We root for teams. We root for teams to win, and there hasn't been a lot of that since Syracuse joined the ACC by and large. So I understand that, but you didn't have a choice given where college sports was going. If you're going to either be in a Power 5 league or not, there is no choice, and you have to do what you can to do that. Thank you, Jason, with the update. Women's lacrosse team did get the win in overtime. Fantastic. And there are some programs doing well in the ACC, and there's an example of one right there. And I do think that the men's lacrosse team will get it going eventually. They had a tough loss to Virginia today. It's going to take a year or so before Gary Gate, Dave Petromalo and company get that going, but I think they'll be back sooner rather than later. Jimmy says that Maryland left the ACC for big money. Everybody follows the money. That's right. They went from a big money league to a bigger money league in the Big Ten. So big discussion about that. And that's the reality. By being in a league like the ACC, it doesn't put you on even keel with a program like Duke because they've won 6 in a row. They've owned Syracuse in most of those games. Look, Syracuse beat Duke at the Dome in 2014, the John Gillen shot in 2017, the 95-91 overtime win that I mentioned just 3 years ago. So it can happen. It does happen. Especially when you play a team twice a year. Most of the time, Syracuse plays Duke twice a year. Sometimes the schedule only puts them on there once. But for the most part, Duke has absolutely owned Syracuse in this series. So you got North Carolina Monday. Carolina got a 10-point win over NC State today, but they're still riding the bubble for the NCAA tournament. Baycott, 28 points, 13 rebounds. So quick turnaround for that, and that'll be 5 games in 10 days. For Syracuse. Then they get a little bit of a breather, take a little less than a week off. They're going to finish out against Miami. That's a tournament team and not an easy game to finish out with. And then you got the ACC tournament. So minimum, there's 3 games left. And the mission at this point, it's sad to say, it's frankly pathetic because this is just the standard of Syracuse basketball, but, shows how much you kind of take it for granted that this program has a winning record. That's what they're playing for now, to avoid being the first team to go under 500. And I think what's missing now is kind of that signature moment, right? Because this was the opportunity for that. If they beat Carolina on Monday, I mean, that might kind of save things. But like I said, Carolina's not where they are usually. They're a bubble team this year. Miami, we'll see what kind of game it is. That could be something. And if they make a deep run in the ACC tournament, maybe. But other than that, this is going to be a season remembered for how Syracuse straddled the 500 line, and ultimately we'll see where they end up, either above or below 500. And one way or the other, it's going to end up being one of the worst years Jim Boeheim's ever coached. It is one of his worst years already in terms of record, but by perception, by everything, people are going to look back on this year and say that the program took a big, big step backwards, right? David says NIT, let's hope for that. Frankly, if they declined an NIT bid, I wouldn't mind that. Who wants to go to the NIT? Like Syracuse can thumb its nose at the NIT. This is not a program that goes to the NIT. It's tournament, baby. This is NCAA tournament or bust. They went to the NIT a few years ago because they got snubbed out of the real deal, and they should have been in the NCAA tournament in 2017. but they skip the NIT. I don't think anybody would really care. I mean, they'll play in it because they want the experience and get those guys in the postseason. By the way, they have waived the rule. You used to have finished above 500 to make the NIT. That's no longer the case. There is a waiver now. And they would take a program like Syracuse for all of the discussion we're having about the down season the Orange has had. I mean, it's still a marquee program that the NIT would certainly take. But, at this point, that's it's like when you watch those game shows, that's the parting gift they give you when you don't win the big prize. That's what the NIT has always been. So not something you necessarily want to strive for, but really when you're looking at in the short term, what they're playing for, that's what they're playing for. Finish above 500, get to the NIT. Janine says, interesting to see what starters Syracuse will have next year. Yeah, Jim Boeheim saying that at least 2 or 3 freshmen are going to be in the starting lineup next year. I mean, you got Gerard coming back. You got Symir coming back. You've got, I believe, Jesse Edwards coming back, right? Frank Anselm returns. I don't think he'll start, obviously, with Jesse. Which of the freshmen will crack the starting lineup? Benny, you would think, will start the Chris Bunch, could crack that starting lineup. But 2 or 3 freshmen could start, and a bunch are going to play next year. So that is going to be really interesting to see what that lineup looks like as, the mind starts to go to next year with this thing winding down here. As Lori says, the NIT would be good experience for freshmen and the bench, but that's really, all you're looking at there. So, and Dennis is still complaining that Syracuse is no longer in the Big East. I mean, listen, I hear you, man. I miss it too. It is all about the money, but yeah, that's the reality of the situation, right? It's like pining over an old girlfriend we broke up with 10 years ago. I mean, what is that going to do at this point? And as David notes, I got to add a couple more players. Yeah, and who could be 1 or 2 players that go to the portal that we don't see coming? I mean, we just went through the list. I mean, let's go through it. Joe's not going to the portal. I'm pretty confident. Symir's obviously not going to the portal. He already did once, and he came home. Don't think Frank will do it. Jesse is committed to come back for everything that I know, right? Benny is absolutely coming back. For those that said he would go in the portal, would think about it because he didn't get the playing time. He's committed. He's in. He's already on the record twice said he's not going in the transfer portal. He's committed to coming back. So that's not an issue. Maybe there's 1 or 2 we're not thinking of. You always got to leave open the possibility of guys coming in, and Syracuse certainly will have to be aggressive and looking in the portal for 1 or 2 guys. There was a recruit there today, so we know about the 5 coming in, but there was also a visit today, and it's a 6'3" combo guard that Syracuse is really looking forward to having the opportunity to recruit more and want him to come in next year. And I'm just backtracking here, make sure I get this young man's name right here. You guys know who it is, so pop in the chat. Oh boy, I got his name right on the tip of my tongue here. I just don't want to get it wrong at this point. Judah. Oh boy. Let's see if you guys put it in the chat. Yeah, Judah Mintz. Thank you, David and Jason and a couple of you guys is having a brain cramp there. Yeah, so Judah Mintz, 6'3" combo guard. He was visiting today in addition to Bunch and Taylor and pretty much all the class of 2022 was at this game. I think short 1 or 2 players there. So if you can add him to the mix and 1 guy or 2 out of the transfer portal, depending on numbers, then a lot of new players that are going to be getting in the lineup for Syracuse next year with the returning experience that we mentioned. So already thinking about next year, but 3 games to go for the Orange. One of them is a quick turnaround Monday night in Chapel Hill. Then they go to Miami, and that's the regular season, and then at least 1 ACC tournament game. So we'll meet again Monday night right here. Do a little Syracuse basketball post game, just as we did tonight. If you missed the show live, guys, don't forget it archives automatically on our Facebook page. The YouTube video, we put it out on social media. You can find it in my recap on syracuse.com as well. So always appreciate you guys coming back after the game. But if you can't be here live, you can always watch the replay on your time. So the Orange go down big to Duke, 97-72. The final at the Carrier Dome. Syracuse now 15-14, 9-9 in the ACC. Thanks for coming by as always, friends. We'll talk to you again Monday night after Syracuse takes on North Carolina.